All right, welcome to the next lesson on ancient Greece. Okay, in the last lesson, it was more basically an introduction to the unit on ancient Greece. We talked about how we are copycats of the Greeks in many ways, also the Romans, but we'll get to that in the next unit. Not of everything, though. I do need to say not of everything, and that is on purpose. There's a lot of things like, say, democracy, and our art and architecture, our plays and entertainment, that yes, we pull heavily from ancient Greece. But I also mentioned how one of the Bellwork questions, or one of the questions I had you guys answer in the beginning of class, had to do with this idea that what stories would be around 50 years from now and why, or even 1,000 years from now and why. And it all had to come down to this idea of like, well, what is the moral of the story? Does that story communicate something that is worthwhile and something that helps people later, like in whatever generation? You could say these time-tested morals, or these time-tested themes, time-tested ideas, things that just keep coming back over and over again. And there's a lot of stories from Greek mythology. Well, one, we're fascinated with Greek mythology. I know I am. It can get a bit weird, especially according to like basically social norms of today. Very, very weird. I'll just leave it at that. Well, the story I'm about to get into goes a bit into that, and I'll apologize up front for a little bit of that. But at this point, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be giving you the story, or the basic story of King Minos. And what I'd like you to do as you watch this, or as you're listening to this, is in your mind think of, why would we still tell this story today? Why do we even think this is worthwhile to tell today? Why wouldn't we try to censor this, you could say, or just say, no, we don't want to talk about this anymore. Also, maybe put yourself in the place of, say, a Greek mom telling a bedtime story to her kid. Not just the idea of telling a bedtime story, but trying to relay or portray some sort of moral in life, or saying, hey, it's good to be like this, it's not good to be like this, it's good to do this, it's not good to do this, that type of stuff. Just have that in your mind as you're listening to this, and think of what those morals, or that, and the moral of the story, the morals, plural, are being communicated here. Now, before I get into this story, I just need to get one little caveat. Just so you know, there's many different tellings of the stories of mythology. Some are pretty straightforward, and others, well, like this one, actually have a few things that are a little bit off here and there, and I've read so many different versions or understandings or tellings of it that, well, let's put it this way. The story I tell you right now, you could read or hear something a little bit different, or a little different take on it, and that's fine. Again, it all comes down to what is the moral that is trying to be portrayed overall in the story. So, that being said, here you go. The story of King Minos is basically this idea where you have he is one of three sons. It's really like two. Well, there's three sons total, but two that are vying for the throne. They're both princes. All three of them are princes, but two of them are vying for the throne. The eldest brother, I forgot his name, Rhadamanthys, or Rhada something. He's first in line for the throne. It's believed that he's going to be the one that gets the throne of the kingdom of Crete. Minos believes that he should be king. And to basically prove it, just to sum up this part of the story, he makes an offering to Poseidon, and basically asks for Poseidon help and recognition that he should be the rightful king of Crete, the kingdom of Crete. By the way, we call them Minoans. That's why I'm talking about this. Just to back from the story for a little bit, but we call them Minoans because of this guy, King Minos, the story I'm telling you right now. That's why I'm telling the story. I should have said that beforehand. So back to the story. Minos becomes king. Poseidon basically favors him. And one of the things that King Minos says that he will do is that he will basically make the requisite sacrifices and offerings to Poseidon, to always, basically in thanks, saying, hey, thank you for making me king. And it doesn't stop there, though. King Minos, he is known as a just king, someone who actually sets up a society that's very good, at least for his people, not necessarily for others. We'll get there in a second. And then he also expands his kingdom. Basically, he takes over the whole Aegean, potentially, the greatest kingdom of the time, you could say. So he's by far the most powerful. And this is in part due to Poseidon. Poseidon has blessed him, allowed him to do this, and Poseidon, again, being god of the sea. Anyways, Minos is basically thankful for this. Now, at one point, though, in this whole sacrifices and offerings thing, again, there's two different tellings of how this goes. I'm just going to go with the one that I see more often than not. And that is that Poseidon basically says, hey, I'm going to send you a bull, and you need to sacrifice it to me to so you can show me how much you're thankful to me, that you honor me, you view me as your god type thing. And so he sends Minos this bull, this great white bull, and Minos is pretty taken with the bull. He's like, this is an amazing bull. You know what? I'll keep this to myself, and I'll sacrifice one of my other really good bulls for my herd, because I'd really like to use this bull to basically create an even better flock of cattle, basically. And, of course, this really makes Poseidon mad. And at this point, Poseidon doesn't want to necessarily knock down the kingdom of Crete, because that's partly his kingdom too. You could say it's something that he has. How do I put this? It's something that he's invested in. He's not going to destroy all that, but he's pretty ticked off at Minos. He's like, I created you, I made you, and you're going to do this to me. So again, this next part, there's a few different tellings of it. But basically, Poseidon decides to get at Minos in a very personal way. I'm not going to destroy your kingdom. I'm not necessarily going to take your power away. But I'm going to get at you pretty good here. So, in this whole idea, of these conquerings and going off and being at war and just creating the greatest kingdom ever and being the greatest judge over his people ever, he has forgotten, Minos that is, has forgotten one major thing. That is his wife. There's a little bit more that goes into the story and a little bit more tellings, but I'm going to keep this simple. Basically, she's kind of has a big woe is me type of time where, like, my husband doesn't love me as much as I thought or I think he should. And she's always kind of in the garden crying a bit. And so this is where Poseidon sees his opportunity to get at Minos. He's basically going to do something to his wife. So he's not going to kill his wife. But what he does is there's two different versions of this. He either, one, sends the bull, basically makes that bull that he sent in the first place, basically a kind of a wild ravaging animal that no one can come near, and he sends the bull into the gardens, and I just forgot Minos' wife's name. It starts with a P, but I don't want to guess right now. So anyways, Minos' wife, the queen, sees the bull and falls madly in love with it. Now, this is because of a spell that is put on her by Poseidon. Okay, that's one telling. Another telling I've heard is that Poseidon himself turns himself into a bull and casts a spell on the wife of Minos to have her fall madly in love with him, Poseidon, who was a bull at the time. By the way, it's not too far-fetched, because one of the things of the story that I left out is, Minos' father is supposedly Zeus, who turned himself into a bull to seduce Minos' mother. Anyways, getting aside from that, yes, it's going into weird zones. I'm trying to stay away from too much mental imagery here. Basically, the queen just really, really needs to be in love with this bull. But she realizes it's kind of hard to be in love with a bull who's just raving. It seems like it's raving mad. So she goes to an inventor, basically a slave of her husband, of Minos', a guy named Daedalus, a very famous character by the way, through the stories of Greek mythology. He's in a lot of other stories. By the way, his son is Icarus, if you've heard that name before. And she basically convinces him, you need to help me. You need to help me, essentially. I'm trying to stay away from imagery, but basically get with this bull, this amazing bull. And so he's like, all right, I can help you out. And so they make actually a cow and put it out in the field and have her get inside the cow. And yada, yada, yada. Again, don't want to go through too much mental imagery. She gets pregnant by the bull. Again, whether it's just the bull itself or Poseidon, this is where it's kind of weird, because she does get pregnant, and the son is considered a bastard son of Poseidon, which is a half man, half bull, the Minotaur. This is the origins of the Minotaur, and why you see the picture of the Minotaur here. Now, this is something that is just considered a major, major shame for Minos. It's like, holy cow, he knows what happened. He knows that basically this is Poseidon getting at him. And so, at first, well, basically here, this is what he's told. He is told by Poseidon, you must take care of or care for this bastard son of mine, this Minotaur, because I'm changing the deal a bit. In the beginning, you needed to offer me, sacrifice the bull that I sent and make me other offerings. Now, what I need you to do is not allow the Minotaur to die. You need to keep this Minotaur alive. Once this Minotaur dies, your kingdom will fall, type thing. So, this is where you can kind of step back a little bit and just say, if you were King Minos, what would you do in this situation? Would you ask for forgiveness? Would you try to make things right? How would you deal with this? Well, you can think of, basically you can pause the video if you want to and just think of how you deal with this, but the way Minos deals with this is he just hides it. He's like, how do I deal with this just crazy kind of psychotic bull, half man, half bull, this Minotaur? It's a shame on me. It's a shame on my family. It's kind of this symbol of just, I don't want to have this. I don't want to have the shame or this embarrassment in my life. So, basically, Minos goes to Daedalus and says, help me basically get rid of this guy. We can't kill him, but how are we gonna keep him from kind of like destroying the countryside and things like that, and just showing off my shame? And Daedalus helps him and builds what's called the labyrinth. So the labyrinth, just a gigantic maze, very hard to get out of once you're in it, and this is meant to be a prison for the Minotaur. Now, then comes the problem of how do you feed the Minotaur? Because Poseidon makes it that the only thing that the Minotaur likes to eat is human flesh. That's another thing Minos is like, I don't take care of that. How am I going to feed this guy? Well, he had just conquered an empire, and he's been receiving tribute from conquered places, including places like Athens. There's a whole story that goes into this. But he then says, okay, Athens and other cities, although Athens is the main one we talk about, instead of paying me taxes and the idea of tribute, you need to give me basically your young men and your young women, at random, to essentially every now and again that I'm going to throw them into the labyrinth, and they'll be eaten by the Minotaur, and that's how I'm going to keep them there. Now, I've heard different tellings of this, and one, there's the idea that the tributes know what's happening to them. They know they're going to be eaten, basically. And I've heard stories where, no, they're actually invited by Minos to this great banquet at the palace of Knossos in the kingdom of Crete, on the island of Crete, and that they're given this great party and then sent into the labyrinth as this kind of this game, and then they all get eaten. So in some versions of the story they know what's about to happen to them. Other versions of the story they don't know what's going to happen to them. I'm going to stick with the idea that they don't know what's going to happen to them. Although the reason I'm saying this is because I've seen more of the tellings saying that they do know what's going to happen to them. And this this kind of ends part one of the story. Just Minos, where he's doing awesome, he does great because of his offerings and his looking to Poseidon, and then he kind of ruins himself by no longer looking to Poseidon, you could say, and then he has this great shame in his life. So that's kind of part one of this. Now we've got to go to part two of this story, where we're actually going to shift gears. Everything I just talked about is mostly about Minos and Poseidon. Now we're going to talk about basically a kid named Theseus, a Greek hero named Theseus. There's so many stories about this guy. I'm skipping over a ton of them. Again, go look up the stories, read the Iliad, although abridged might be better than unabridged. The Iliad, by the way, is the story with all the Greek most of the Greek mythologies. Odyssey is the other one. But with Theseus, basically he is, how do I put this? I'm not going to go into this whole story because it gets really weird. He's essentially the son, somewhat bastard son, but not really, of the king of Athens. And I just told you guys how Athens has to give tributes to King Minos in the form of young men and young women at random to feed the Minotaur. So basically, Theseus grows up outside, not knowing who his dad is. Well, Again, different tellings of that, but he basically doesn't know who his dad is. But he does have the blood. He's a demigod. He has the blood of the gods going through him. And I'm forgetting, actually, I'm pretty sure it's Poseidon, actually, that goes through him, or it could be Zeus, but I think it's Poseidon. I need to look this up again. Anyways, it gets really confusing, actually. But he's a demigod. Let's just leave it there. He's a demigod, kind of like Hercules. He's above the normal man, you could say. And at age 16, he goes off to find his father, Aegeus, the king of Athens. And when he actually comes to Athens, by the way, he goes through a whole tons of like trials and things like that, beats a lot of people that couldn't be beaten type thing, kind of like a Hercules story. Gets to his father. His father's very happy to see him. Actually goes through a part where his father actually tried to poison him because he didn't really know who he was, and then he finds out who he is right at the last second, slaps the poison out of his hand. Thank you. I'm glad to see you, son. And then exiles the person, the sorceress that was trying to get Theseus killed. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent. I'm sorry. So just leave it at the idea that Theseus comes and finds his dad. Wonderful, awesome. Then the ambassadors from Crete, from King Minos, come and say, we need your tributes. And Theseus actually volunteers as a tribute at this point. Usually it's taken as random, but he says, nope, I'm going to take the place of one of the guys that's chosen as random, and I'm going to go myself. So, by the way, if you're feeling like you kind of were saying like, well, that's what happens in the Hunger Games. If you're go with that book series or seen those movies, yeah, that's where Suzanne Collins, the author of Hunger Games, gets this from, is from this story I'm telling you right now. I volunteer as tribute. So Theseus goes, and when he gets to Crete, again, different tellings of the story. The idea of like they have this great ball, but no one, like this party, this feast, but no one really knows what's about to happen to him, or the idea like they know what's going to happen to him. I'm going to go with the idea that they really don't know what's going to happen to him, just because I kind of like that version more. So I'm going to stick with that. So they're all there. They're having this feast. And the daughter of King Minos, a girl named Ariadne, she sees Theseus and falls madly in love with him. To the point where she's like, I know what's going to happen to him because my half-brother, because her half-brother's the Minotaur, they have the same mother, is going to eat all these people. I don't want Theseus to be eaten. I love him, just by looking at him. So she goes to Daedalus. Again, here comes Daedalus again, and says, how can I help them? He's like, all right, here you go. Here's a spool of thread. I've heard it said a spool of wool, spool of linen. Anyways, a spool of thread, string. Have him tied around his waist and tie it to at the beginning of the maze, and he can go through there. And then here's the sword that it's a sword that can kill the Minotaur, basically. Now, how he gets this, again, mythology isn't necessarily meant to make sense. It's a story, and then they get the morals of the story from it. So she goes then to Theseus and basically proclaims her love to him and says, here, this is what's waiting for you. There's a Minotaur in there, and he's going to eat all of you. But if you take these two gifts I have for you, you can defeat the Minotaur, and I know you can do this. Completely putting her faith and trust in Theseus. And she gives him basically one demand, saying, please take me with you. I'm betraying my father, I'm betraying my family, I'm betraying my kingdom. Please take me with you back to Athens so I can share the rest of my life with you. So Theseus goes into the labyrinth along with the other tributes. They find the Minotaur, and after a pretty big struggle, he's able to kill the Minotaur. Then following the string, he's able to come back out. He grabs Ariadne as well as her sister Phaedra and gets on a ship. I'll get to Phaedra in a second. Gets on a ship and then starts heading back to Athens. Now, at this point, there's a few different tellings of how this story goes. I'm going to stick with the one that has more of, you could say, like the moral of the story in place. So, on the way back, Theseus seems to basically eye Phaedra a little bit more than he does Ariadne. And think about this. Ariadne has just given up her life for it. Phaedra, not really sure why she joined this in the first place, besides maybe she has a little infatuation with Theseus, or maybe she liked a different tribute. I don't know. This is the part of the story I don't know. I was able to find out. So, but Ariadne starts seeing that, why don't you love me type thing. So she confronts Theseus about it and has a talk with him. He's like, you're right. Tell you what, we'll stop at the next island. Happens to be an island called Naxos. We'll spend the night there, and I can show you how much I love you. Yada, yada, yada. So basically they spend the night on this island. The ship is at dock. But in the morning, he leaves her there. He leaves Ariadne there and then sails off. Now, by the way, there's a couple different things to go into this. One of the tellings says that the god, it was either, I think Dionysus forced Theseus to leave her there because he liked Ariadne. Again, different tellings of the same story. What I'm going with, though, is the idea that Theseus basically, whether he didn't want to stand up to Dionysus or that he just would rather have been with Phaedra, either way, Ariadne gets left on Naxos, and he continues towards Athens with Phaedra, which, by the way, Phaedra becomes his wife, his queen, in Athens later on. But as far as we know, I will say this, in his haste to kind of get away, and in this idea of having to leave Ariadne, whether he was sad about it or whether he had mixed feelings about it, he told his father Aegeus that he would put up white sails to say that he made it back all right. He forgets to do that in his he just forgets to do it. And when Aegeus sees a ship with black sails coming back, he feels like Theseus is dead, that all the tributes are dead, and he decides to basically jump off a cliff and is killed. In fact, the Aegean Sea is named after King Aegeus because of this whole part right here. Of course, they get back there, and Theseus is crowned king, although it's kind of a sad situation because his dad died and didn't have to. And then Phaedra becomes his queen. And there's a bunch of other stories from Theseus that come here, definitely some heroic stories after he becomes king of Athens. But how do I put this? He doesn't have that great of a life. His wife doesn't really love him as much, Phaedra. They don't really get along that well. And when Theseus does die, it's kind of a little bit in an ignominious way. So this is the end of the story, by the way. I could go a lot more. We're going to do a lot more of mythology. I hope you enjoyed listening to that a little bit. But here's the deal. I asked you before to be thinking, why would we tell this story? Why would we still tell the story? Why would the ancient Greeks tell this story to kids as a bedtime story? What are they trying to communicate? Whatever version that they got and that we use. Well, when it comes to Minos, two big things there. Power corrupts. The idea do you recognize where you got your power from? Are you thankful to those that are helping you out and have given you just the chances in life? Or do you feel like you can do it all yourself, and do you become kind of a bad guy over time? Because Minos in the beginning seems like a pretty good guy, but then goes pretty bad over time. That's something that definitely does resonate to us as Americans, because we're all about that. We've seen that in history a lot of times, how power does corrupt, and we wanted to set up a government system, to where we could reduce the amount of power and spread it out, and then have it check and balance each other. I hope you guys are aware of that whole idea of check and balances. But so stories like this idea of we don't, Minos seems like he was a good judge, but in the end, still no. And the whole idea of being grateful versus ungrateful towards the god Poseidon, towards his wife, and things like that. Life might have been better. Maybe things would have gone better for him if he would have just had more gratefulness to him. So then you get to the tributes, and you have these morals, this individual courage, and that Theseus would volunteer to do this. That he's willing to sacrifice himself for the life of another, to help out his dad, to help out his family, to help out his country. And these are people he hadn't even met before, because, like I said, he grew up away from his dad and from his country. Yet he was still very, very into that. You could say quite nationalistic. He wanted to protect others. And then, of course, what I keep going over and over again, and I'll continue to say throughout this whole ancient Greek unit, he's definitely an underdog. Yes, he's a demigod, but in all these situations, he is an underdog. He shouldn't be able to get through it, yet he's able to do so. He basically is ingenuitive. He's able to think outside the box. He's able to use his skills and his abilities and his talents in a way that help him out of tough situations. And we like to see that on us as well. Again, so there's, very more on the side of positive morals. Although I will say, even with Theseus, you can see how even the power corrupts thing goes to him too in the end. Or I shouldn't, maybe not the power corrupts, but just not the power corrupts, the grateful versus ungrateful. Like, he just wasn't, was he really grateful to Ariadne for what she did? She gave up everything for him, and then he just left her on the island of Naxos. Just like Minos kind of left his wife in the gardens, kind of crying. There's definitely a moral of the story there. It comes down to the idea of, like, hey, guys, be good to your wives. Happy wife, happy life, that type of thing. Don't leave them behind type thing. And that's, something that was portrayed then. And that's still something that, a reason why people, we resurrected these stories. I shouldn't say resurrected. They've been around forever, but there's a lot more focus put on them in modern history, about 500 years ago and on to today, I should say. Now, with the labyrinth and a minotaur, not a lot of that has to do with hidden shame. You think of things like that, just things we do wrong in life, or we just don't want to face up to. And things that you don't really just face up to, or things you don't try to essentially kind of correct as best you can, will just fester and will, in the end you. Because remember, when the Minotaur dies, that's basically the end of Minos' kingdom. So, like, he fades into the background. So, anyways, again, there's a lot more to those stories. Again, there's different tellings of the stories, but I'm just showing that right now because this is why we continue the stories, and then also why sometimes we'll even change the stories today, like the movie clip I showed in class, to essentially show different things we want to show today. Just the last thing I'll point out with this one is, well, like the Disney movie Hercules, that has a lot of morals that we'd like to portray in the world we have today, like how we want to see our society go today. But if you know the Hercules story, that is not the Hercules story. Now, I really like that movie, but it is not the Hercules story. There are different morals portrayed in the actual Hercules story than we see in the Disney version of the Hercules story, or again in Greek, the Heracles story. Anyways, a bit of a long video. I apologize. Well, hopefully this was worthwhile to be listening to, and I will see you in the next one.